When a man joins a woman in marriage, they become something beyond husband and wife. They transform into something even greater, the very picture of the church itself. I'm Hayden Ludwig, and thanks for tuning in to Restoration Spotlight. Eve was made out of Adam's rib, the great theologian Matthew Henry once observed, not out of his feet to be trampled upon him, but out of his side to be equal with him, under his arm to be protected, near his heart to be loved. Marriage is not mankind's creation, it is God's, the means he ordained to fulfill his commandment to us: multiply, fill the earth, and have dominion over it. If you are married, know that God made you for your spouse before he made anything else. Done right, it is perhaps our greatest source of comfort and holiness. Done wrong, well, nothing can destroy a family like an unhappy, unfaithful marriage. Which is why it's so mystifying that the American church does so little to disciple husbands and wives after they take their wedding vows. Churches spend $6 billion each year in youth ministry. But for 85% of churches, the annual budget for marriage enrichment is $0, not a penny. Yet our nation faces a crisis. Young people are not marrying, and those who do often have little active support from the church when life pressures peak: kids, financial worry, and aging parents, just to name a few. My guest today, JP Gance, has the solution. JP is president of Communio, a parachurch organization helping churches reach struggling Christian couples before their marriage falls apart, with incredible results. JP, welcome to Restoration Spotlight.
Hayden, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Now, before we get into the concept you've pioneered, marriage enrichment, I want to paint a picture of marriage in the United States. So let's use some statistics here. Everybody knows divorce is at a historic high. Divorce rates are highest among couples age 18 to 44, which is perhaps 3 times higher than couples age 50 or older. In other words, if you and your wife can stick it out through the hardest years, your likelihood of divorce plummets dramatically. Now, that's true among Christians and the unchurched alike, but here's the most amazing stat. Among couples who pray together daily, the divorce rate is less than 1%, effectively non-existent, meaning consistent, faithful discipline yields a healthy marriage. But JP, we know that doesn't happen on its own, does it?
No, absolutely not. Ultimately, it takes, I love Edmund Burke's quote that there's nothing that shall not yield to perseverance and method. And we think about this in all aspects of our lives, right? And marriage, being good at anything, being good in a relationship requires some effort on our part, right? And the reality is, just to speak to a couple of the stats that you opened this with, I think they're worth going back to, is the modal time, the normal time for divorce to occur, most frequently occurring, is within the first 5 years of marriage. Okay, that's modal. But that doesn't mean it goes away after that. It continues early in marriage to be higher than later in marriage, just as you noted, right? And the good news, some good news to share, is that actually most marriages, most first marriages, do last a lifetime. Okay, that there's some debate on the exact number, whether it's closer to 60%. Or as high as close to 70% of all first-time marriages will last a lifetime.
Interesting.
Right? And the one of the big things that comes up in the data, and I'll lean on Shanti Feldhahn's analysis of the data that she goes into in her great book, The Good News About Marriage, that for those couples who find themselves struggling in a really bad place in their marriage, if they stay committed within 5 years, without reporting doing anything else, 80% of them report being very, very happy in their marriage, right? Now, there's a lot more that you should and can do to have a great marriage. I think having a growing in a daily prayer life is amongst the first of those, right? Growing. God made us both. When we talk and work with our church partners, we talk about really that God made us both body and soul, right? We know that from the account in Genesis, and that means really we should grow both on a human level and also on a spiritual level, right? So we should grow in and work on our spiritual life, grow in holiness, and then also grow in health on a human level. That means being able to do well with the skills of having a healthy relationship, communicating well, setting shared expectations well, resolving conflict in a healthy way. These are examples of the types of human skills that everyone and anyone can learn.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to get into marriage enrichment here, but let's stick with the problem, because we are facing an epidemic here of loneliness, depression, suicide, and a lot of that stems from not only divorce, but broken families, and often broken families themselves stem from divorce. So let me give you some stats here. So out of wedlock births have doubled since 1980. They're now about 40% nationwide. That used to be among certain demographics, Black Americans. No, it's across everybody now. At the same time, boys who grow up with divorced parents are less likely to attend church, which is fascinating. Why is that? Well, study after study, and you've shown me this as well when we've spoken before, fathers play an outsized role in determining the religion of their children. Mm-hmm. Now, you point to these in your work, JP, as symptoms and not drivers of family decline. Explain that to us.
Yeah, so when you look at the norms of getting to church regularly, as an example, right? 80% of everybody sitting in church on Sunday grew up in a home of continuously married parents, right? So what we've seen over the last 40 years is a significant rise of what we call the religious nuns, those who hold no religion whatsoever, right? Generally speaking, people in church on Sunday, Protestant or Catholic, all have this big thing in common, right? 80% of them grew up in an intact married home, okay? And what stands out to us this is an analysis that we've done over and over again, most recently with about 19,000 completed surveys of Sunday churchgoers. If you were, regardless of your age, if you're a single man born in 1999 or a married man born in 1964, and you're sitting there in church on Sunday morning, 81% of your peers in church on Sunday morning from those groups are from an intact married home, right? So what began to shift that a lot of social observers saw, right, is you started to see a rise in religious non-affiliation. There's a lot of efforts to try to figure out why less and less people are getting to church. One of our big points to pastors is that restoring marriage is actually an evangelical necessity, right? It shouldn't surprise the Christian, right, that salvation history is dripping with nuptial language, right? You have the creation account beginning with a wedding in the garden, and we see that time will conclude. We see in the book of Revelation with the eschatological wedding feast of the Lamb, and then you see over and over again this nuptial theme in the Old Testament, from the minor prophets like Hosea to the major prophets like Isaiah, and you see it in Paul's writings, and you see it in what he calls that great mystery in Ephesians 5, and the importance for us Christians to be subject to one another out of reverence for Christ, as he says in Ephesians 5:21. So the norm of Christian marriage is what we see, and our message to pastors is absolutely key if we're going to see a revival, if we're going to see restoration of Christian faith. We see, and I say to folks deeply concerned about the future of the American Republic, that we need these things to see a great restoration of the health of the Republic itself.
Right, exactly. As they would say, healthy Christian marriage is a gospel issue, is really what you're saying here. And I want people to understand this very clearly. If you want to save the republic, you need to restore butts in pews. And if you want people in pews, you need to have healthy families. And if you want to have healthy families, you've got to tackle the reasons for divorce. So in the opener, we talked about some of the great statistics. Sorry, go ahead, please.
Yeah. And I'm going to put even an added exclamation to what you just noted on combating divorce. We also have to do a lot to help our young people get married. Okay, so the number of people getting married annually, right, is down north of 31% since the year 2000, and it's down 65% since the year 1970. Wow. There are so many fewer people getting married each year. Lots of people, the tech bros, Elon Musk, others have talked about the collapsing fertility rate. Well, married people in the United States actually have a significantly above replacement level fertility. That married people in the U.S. have the same overall fertility rate as they've had in the early 90s. And the big challenge that we have is there's a lot less married people today, either through divorce or never marrying in the first place. And as a consequence of the rapid fall off of the number of people getting married, we've seen a decline in our fertility rate of 24% since the year 2007. And so this is certainly a civilizational issue in a lot of ways. It's as we noted here, it's a threat to the republic itself. You can't have a robust, social, like the Social Security, Medicaid, the benefits programs that we've grown accustomed to, without having more workers paying into the system. You can't have more workers paying into the system if you don't have more people being born. You can't have more people being born if you don't have loving marriages and families, right? So it fuels just a legion of social challenges to the country. But we can fix all that. The threats to the republic, the financial security and health of our country, restore the ideas of self-governance, if we can help people govern themselves well, to enter into marriage in a healthy way, to raise children in a way that leads to a moral life, which is a self-governing life.
Right, exactly. All those things are symptoms, they're downstream rather of this one problem of people aren't entering into marriage and sticking with marriage here. So let's contrast a little bit. We did talk in the opener a little bit about the massive annual budget for things like youth ministry. We've also, you've written a lot about the massive budgets that church have, and this is great that they have them, massive budgets that churches have to help pastor and counsel young people getting married. But when you're married, when you're in the middle of that, when all of these challenges, you've got, 4 toddlers hanging off you, and you've got aging parents and sickness and financial worries, you're 40 and you're dealing with a lot of these stresses, the institution of the church is often not there to provide a consistent weekly or even daily counsel. Now, this is where you guys come in. So let's talk about marriage enrichment and start with the concept here and how it's addressing these problems, and then what Communio's role is in actually seeing it through.
Yeah, and just to double click on that, 85% of all churches aren't spending any money in this area of marriage ministry, right? And I would note, I think outside of counseling couples or helping those who are at the end game in a crisis, there's nothing either to help our single people discern marriage well, okay, and to enter into marriage well, and then there's nothing for those after that wedding day, outside of some brief counseling beforehand. So when we say marriage enrichment, right, there's an entire academic field called marriage and relationship education, and in it you have they've uncovered 5 interpersonal skill areas and 5 intrapersonal skill areas that the secular sciences have found if you do these and you live them well, then you're more likely to have marriage success, right? And I think I love Augustine's quote that all truth is God's truth. And so what frequently is happening is the psychological sciences are uncovering core biblical truths,
right,
of treating each other with great love and dignity, right? And so those skills, I'll just rattle through them briefly. On the interpersonal skill areas: communication, conflict resolution, emotional intimacy, togetherness skills, just being able to be together is itself a skill of relationship management, being able to manage your relationship. And then the intrapersonal skill areas, discernment, particularly for singles, discerning, being able to avoid an unhealthy relationship, an unhealthy marriage, self-control, appreciation, expectation, management, and then commitment. And I'll zero in on one example with appreciation, right? For the Christian, we know gratitude is such a central part of the spiritual life, right? And when we examine our lives and we think all the great gifts that we have received from God. Now, this is also important for us in our relationship with our spouse, right? What are we grateful about in our spouse, right? And being able to not only think about those things that the world might prompt us to, the annoyances and the frustrations with, our spouse not being emotionally available at a certain time, or some, leaving dishes in the sink, all of the normal and legitimate complaints someone might have, but having the ability to also pause and being grateful for the good that our spouse brings to our marriage. That's important. I think it's important for that. The secular sciences are saying this is important, but I think also the spiritually mature Christian would recognize this is an important part of our Christian life, right? And so we want to make these skills normal in church, right? That the idea that we're learning these skills in church, right? One of the big obstacles we tell pastors is stigma, right? The idea that if you work on your marriage, there's probably something wrong with your marriage. That is the stigma. So if someone, we tell pastors or ask them the question, if you're in after church on Sunday, you're having a donut and someone shares with you that they went to a marriage class last weekend. I ask the question, what's the first thing that comes to your mind about that couple's marriage, right? And they universally say, oh, well, I think they're probably having problems, right?
Right, exactly.
And our big point to pastors is that's the enemy, right? Nobody, we know on this side of the eschaton, on this side of heaven, we're all works in progress. We all can keep getting right? Nobody ever says, man, I maxed out. I'm as spiritually healthy and as holy as I possibly can be. And so, but you should go, talk to somebody else about that. No, but
just in the same way that the guy who refrains from having the donut, is working on his waistline. Nobody thinks there's anything wrong with something like that, right?
Right. No, exactly. Right. No. And our big message when we work with churches is to help them make it normal, that everybody grows in health and holiness in their relationships, in their marriage. The expectation, if you want to get to the place in the church where if someone says, hey, I went to a marriage class last weekend, the response is, why did it take you so long? Wasn't that great? What a great experience. That should be the norm. When we work with churches, we set a quantifiable goal of getting half of all of the adults in the church through the appropriate relationship skills curriculum that the church selects, that we advise them on. Okay, the way we operate, Hayden, is we operate a lot more like a really good campaign consultant to the local church. Okay, except we're not helping the church win an election in November. We're helping them run a campaign to win on marriage and the family, help get more people married, help people grow in health and holiness in their marriages, right? And for the single people, we've never had a time in our country's history where there's been more single adults. Okay, we want to help those single adults who God is calling to marriage to be able to discern that well, enter it well. But for those, there's quite a number who won't be married. Maybe they've been married and won't get married again. Whatever that case may be, help them have help them know how to have healthy Christian relationships, friendships, okay, and live in conformity with the gospel.
Right. So many pastors or priests who are listening will go, well, okay, so it's normal to counsel young couples as they're getting married, right, or right when they get married. And I deliver, a handful of marriage sermons every single year. I help some struggling families here. What you're saying is, no, don't wait. That's good, but don't wait until they're coming to you saying, I think divorce is the only thing on the table here. What you're saying is it's like going to the gym. It's a regular part of this ministry. It's in addition to what they're already doing. So you have the principles. You already know this is a good thing, but you're not recognizing we need to make this a regular ministry in and of itself, in addition to the regular ministry that we're already engaged in. And that is how you produce these great fruits of a healthy marriage.
It's very common for churches to have a men's ministry or a women's ministry of some sort. Okay. One of our points is if God's called me to the married life, then that life is actually God. It's part of God's plan for me to grow in holiness, right? And so help me do that at the local church. Don't only separate me from my wife to a men's group, or don't only separate my wife from me to go to a women's group. We need to actually grow together in holiness, right? And in health. And so that just should be a normal part of our big point. Is it should be a normal part of church life and life in the local church, right? And the reality is at the time of our founding, one of the big things that stuck out to the Europeans who visited our country to understand why was it that the American Republic is working so well. This is the first large republic since antiquity, and it's working really well. Why? Okay, as Tocqueville and others opened up the hood, so to speak, they recognized it was our uniquely strict morals, which were born out of showing up on this continent and being able to have the self-discipline to fashion a civilization out of wilderness. And that self-discipline is nurtured in culture. It was nurtured in two key soul-forming institutions, and that was the church, right, the local church, and it was marriage and the commitment to married life. Okay, and if we're going to see our country get back to great health, okay, then what we need to do is move forward to help people live marriage well in this 21st century, live Christian marriage well. When we do that, you're going to see churches dramatically increase, and you're going to see a desire for self-governance, the capability for self-governance increase, and the desire for it to increase.
Yeah, Maha for the soul, I think we could call it. Let's talk about a case study you guys did in Jacksonville a few years ago. So after putting in this marriage enrichment practice in Duval County, Jacksonville, Florida, the county divorce rate fell 24%. 24%, that is an incredible number. Walk us through what worked there, and also what you've learned from that.
Yeah, and it's worth just noting how significant that was for a moment, right? Men's Health magazine in 2015 listed Jacksonville as one of the six worst cities in America for marriage. Okay, the Huffington Post, you can still find the article, had a piece on the 10 cities where marriage goes to die, and Jacksonville was one of those cities, right? And that was the milieu we were moving into. We ended up working with a phenomenal key partner, Live a Life Ministries. My good friend Richard Albertson was a key content and organizational partner. We were able to move and work with 93 churches across Duval County, mostly Protestant churches, a number of Catholic parishes in the county, and moved in that 3-year span. Actually, before that 3-year span, we tried to figure out what was already happening in the county. We could only total up 300 people countywide. This is a city of about 1 million people. Only 300 people in 2015 had gone through relationship skills programming in the county.
Wow.
So 3 years after, there were 58,912 people moved through relationship skills programming in the county through those 93 churches. We saturated the county with digital outreach, reaching out to people who weren't connected to those churches, inviting them in. And that net was that the divorce rate plummeted 24% in 3 years. We had some business guys, phenomenal guys who actually had not been supporters of our work, were dubious that we had had this kind of positive impact, and hired a third-party outside academic evaluation of our work. And those scholars from the University of Virginia and BYU concluded that there was no other explanation for the decline of divorce in the county other than our intervention in the county. So we realized there was something really big there. The big key was we didn't have a means to scale it outside of spending millions of dollars in large cities annually. And so what we recognized, Hayden, was that the local church really was the best unit of scale. There's more than 100,000 churches in America with 100 or more people, and we can scale through that local church. And, in every town, in every street, in every city in America, hyperbolically, there's a church. And so if we can help equip them with the strategies and tools to make what we did in Jacksonville possible in their local church, we can see transformation. So since then, we've been working to continue to scale that. We're well over 400 churches served in 32 states. We have worked with some phenomenal partners, regional and statewide partners, like the Arizona Southern Baptist Convention. We've worked with the Center for Christian Virtue in Ohio, the Iowa Family Leader on statewide initiatives. We're working now with every Catholic diocese in the state of California, where in each of these cases, these are phenomenal partners who have signed a contract with us, and they're paying for our work to come into their area to work with churches. And then those participating churches get a substantial discount, a 75% discount on our services. And then they help share those costs with our donors to make this Jacksonville Playbook replicable all over the country.
So 58 or more than 58,000 people, 93 churches. So clearly you're going well beyond the regular congregants in these 93 churches. You're going possibly beyond people who are even Christians.
Yes. The idea is the church, right? The church is not to be a lamp hidden under a bushel basket. The church it has it within its, to use some secular language, within its natural business plan.
Yeah, right.
To be a light on a hill, right? And that city on a hill. So recognizing this was a key learning for us in Jacksonville. We started our work working with churches, but then we also worked with different community organizations, both secular and faith-based nonprofits. We kept coming back to the churches, those 93, recognizing that actually they have the capacity to run this play and keep running it because it's actually aligned with the gospel. It's aligned with their natural business plan, so to speak, right? In ways that say the United Way might need an annual grant to keep doing particular programming or any other nonprofit. Churches don't need that. If they understand that this is going to help them lead more souls to into an encounter with the God-man Jesus Christ, right? If we're giving you a play to do that, and in doing so, we're going to help people live Christian marriage well in a way that glorifies God, that so closely aligns with the pastor's heart, that we can mobilize churches across the country from coast to coast to make this happen. We can bring about a great restoration of the health of marriage and family life, and that is the key building block to bringing about a restoration of the health of our country.
So let's say there is a pastor or priest listening. They love everything you said. How would they get involved? What does it cost to them? They're probably operating on a very tight budget right now. So give us a realistic sense of what to expect if they're to reach out to Communio like now.
Yes. Okay, so there's currently, and beginning in January, there'll be a slight addition. So I'll speak as it were in that with that future in mind. Right now, a church works with us either through a direct consultation where they contact us, they sign a contract with us, and we support them. They get 2 staff members who become their consultants and coaches and help them design a measurable set of goals, a written plan, and then we walk with them with monthly consulting meetings to help them execute that plan. That whole process is what we call the data-informed full circle relationship ministry. Okay, and if a church does not have a regional, doesn't have a denomination or a regional church that is part of a sponsoring organization, then that's $18,000 a year, okay, for our services. And then we recommend anywhere between $6,000 and $12,000 for outreach into their community. So that's anywhere, of course, between $24,000 and $30,000 annually, right? Now, if the most common way that churches work with us is through one of these partnerships where we have a regional church of some sort that sponsors, creates a partnership, okay? And when that happens, that $18,000 a year drops by 75%. It drops to $300 a month, and you get the same level of support that you would under the $18,000. Okay. And starting in January, those churches affiliated or connected with one of those groups will be able to begin working with us through our software that we've begun to use, where it's a online classroom setup. All of our coaching is available through an online system, and our marketing and outreach tools. All of our resources are available through the software in a self-guided way with a learning management system. That'll become available in January at a cost of about $100 a month for churches. Okay, so we expect to see significant. This year's number of churches. We're on pace to double the number of churches in 2025 that worked with us over last year. The new churches, and next year we expect that number to triple in 2026.
Unbelievable. That's really amazing. So JP, as we close out here, we've talked a lot about pronatal policies in the family, in the church. Let's talk about pronatal policies in the third sphere of authority that God created, the government. Hungary in particular has had 15 years of steady pro-family, pronatal policies. And there's incredible studies, kind of like the one in Jacksonville about Communio, showing that with these policies in place, marriage rates have doubled, divorce is down 25%, abortions cut in half, and the fertility rate is rising. It's one of the few countries in Europe where that's the case. Now, you'll often hear people say, well, if you get the government involved in funding families, that's like socialism, isn't it? Well, no, it's really a Christian commonwealth, right? The common weal, the common good here. It's about creating families who raise their kids, not bureaucrats raising their kids. Give us kind of your take of what those policies look like, because that's a huge issue in the Trump administration right now, and what an American equivalent might look like.
Yeah, and look, I'm a marriage and family maximalist. I think there's a key thing for the local church. The civil society has a massive role, as we've been talking a lot about, and I think particularly around fertility, the local church can be doing a lot more there as well. But then in the policy world, there's a lot that can and should be done. My friend, Dr. Brad Wilcox at the University of Virginia and the director of the National Marriage Project, also notes that, for instance, in the military, we see that the military itself also has the effect of producing much higher marriage rates and fertility rates. For instance, he has noted that Black Americans who are in the military, the enlisted, have a higher marriage rate and a higher fertility rate than those who aren't.
Interesting.
For instance, right? So there are a number of areas that we know. I would argue that the Great Society programs in the 60s was the reverse of good policy, right? And did a lot to create government policy that disincentivized marriage, disincentivized the family, and created the resources for there to be a greater number of children raised outside of marriage, right? So, okay, as it relates to good and sound policy, I think there's certainly, to the extent that housing policy, right? Everything relating to cost of living, okay? All of that should be seen as marriage policy, okay? If you're going to make it harder, right? In 1980, the average home could be purchased with about 2 years of annual income. Today, it's approaching 6, right? Years of median family income. That's a big problem, right? And so we talked about drill, baby, drill. We need to have build, baby, build as it relates to single family homes. Okay.
Yes,
we need to have an offensive policy. My friend Lyman Stone is a great demographer and published a piece that got a lot of attention by the administration with Wendell Cox in the area of housing policy, and showed that based on survey research, what the market wants is actually single-family homes. People want single-family homes. The preference is for those, not for high-density multifamily dwellings, although people will revert to them if that's the only choice, okay? And so local, state, national policy needs to be ordered to build, baby, build, okay? And then as it relates, I think, to to reasonable incentives, right? If you're gonna, if there's going to be things like, if we're going to be in the business of creating student loans, whether that's for aid for trade schools or colleges, okay, I think there's reason to believe that you should look at forgiveness or incentives. So if you get married by the age of 30, okay, what if those loans are substantially forgiven based on getting married at an age where fertility is more likely to be higher, right? I'll note, I had a great conversation years and years ago. If anybody listening to this thinks this is outside of what the state should be interested in, I'll tell you, a great conversation with Doug Ducey's chief of staff back probably this would have been back in 2016 or 2017. It was his back of the envelope estimate that 80% of Arizona's state spending, its state government spending, was a result of the breakdown of the family. Okay.
Wow, is that right?
And so, if we're deeply concerned about the size and scope of government, okay, then we need to be deeply concerned about people being able to have the human capital that comes from a healthy married home. Okay, and then future taxpayers, the state should be deeply interested in having American citizens raising up future taxpayers. That's a natural thing for the state to be interested and concerned about, and being able to apply good policy in that area is certainly important. But I'll note also there's something for pastors here. I think fundamentally, my friend Catherine Pacolic, who wrote the book Hannah's Children, she's an economist, Harvard educated herself. She has 8 kids, and in her book, she does it's a qualitative analysis of why some women choose to have children and others don't, essentially. And what she finds through doing long form interviews with more than 50 women of different backgrounds, there's this common desire. It's the desire for more children is most frequently animated and best animated by a spiritual impulse. Okay, it's a desire. It's a recognition that in the women that having a child is an encounter with something eternal. That you're creating a soul that will live for all eternity, right? And so I think we've frequently gotten away from in the church, Protestant and Catholic, is being able to talk about children as blessings. Right?
Yes,
Scripture,
absolutely.
Scripture talks about children as blessings.
They're not dependents; they're blessings.
Right, and we need to ask ourselves: Do we really believe that? Right? Do we really? And there's legitimate reasons. Look, and I've got good friends who have legitimate reasons where they can't have more children, and for a variety of health reasons and hardships. But outside of that. Right. The question is, do we view children as a blessing, or do we view children as an inconvenience to us? Right. If our spouse came to us and with a positive pregnancy test, what would be our first reaction and why? Okay. And I think as in the church, we need to actually cultivate spiritual, mature Christians to wrestle with that uncomfort. Okay. Because children fundamentally are a blessing. My wife and I have been very blessed to be able to have eight children of our own. And
I love it. That's great.
And I think it's the greatest gift for. I know my wife would say the same. Being a father and a mother is it provides for us this deep sense of meaning and purpose, and this comes up in the secular data. Brad Wilcox's book "Get Married" shows that the happiest Americans are actually married Americans with children, and married Americans with children who go to church. They have they're the happiest. They have the best sex lives. Okay, they're most healthy and most happy sex lives, and have the deepest reported sense of meaning and purpose. Okay, that's because obviously, as Christians, we believe we're living out our purpose that God has given us, and this is sometimes called the mimetic idea of approaching the world where purpose is coming external to ourselves. Okay, that there is a purpose out there that God has given us, and we're seeking it out, rather than what the modernity has told us, which is, the world is utterly meaningless, and
right.
And so then we are just looking at and grasping at the world as raw material and trying to come up with our own meaning. And when we do that, what we're seeing over and over again is increasing loneliness, increasing amounts of mental health challenges. Okay, and all of this is because we're moving back. We're in many ways often rejecting God's design and purpose in our lives.
Yeah, happiness is not personal autonomy. It's finding where you fit into the world. It's actually part of the understanding of your vocation, your calling. It's not just the career you might have. It's also being a husband or a wife, a mother or a father, the thing that God had made you to do. So, and chances are, just looking at the raw statistics, that is what you're called to do. Well, JP de Gance, thank you. What a wonderful conversation. Thank you for your time on Restoration Spotlight today.
Hayden, thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
I'm Hayden Ludwig, and this is Restoration Spotlight, a project of Restoration News, your source of headline-smashing investigative journalism for the America First movement. Check us out at restoration-news.com. And until next time, stay vigilant and trust in God.